Welcome to the 31st episode of the Most Serious Podcast. In today's episode, I talk to Mr. Arthur Root, who is the founder and CEO of Nostra.ai. Nostra.ai provides website content marketing services which are powered by artificial intelligence. Nowadays, artificial intelligence or AI has just become a buzzword for most tech companies to use and say that they're powered by AI. Me and Arthur Root discussed this, that is this the reality, or are they just using it to make it more fancy? Mr. Arthur Root has a very diverse set of work experience. He has done jobs in many different industries and now has taken a full-time shift to entrepreneurship. We talk about his personal journey with entrepreneurship. We discuss artificial intelligence. We discuss raising funds for your businesses. We also talked about Web3 and all the cool things that it has to offer. Arthur Root also provided me a lot of clarity on the fields of venture capital. And in the end, we also discussed about Shark Tank. I hope you like the conversation today. Let's get into the episode now. I have got finally Arthur Root on the Most Serious Podcast. He is your go-to guy when it comes to the topics of AI or financing or VC or all of the cool technology things that are happening around the world. I'm just hyping Arthur up for this conversation. Welcome to the Most Serious Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. That's a generous description of myself, but I appreciate it.
The description about yourself, and I love doing this to people. Whenever you have someone from a specific field, the very basic question that comes in my mind right after seeing all the work that they've done and the jobs that they did, the product that they're building now is, what were you before all of this? So as a kid, who was Arthur Root? Was he someone who was with his laptop in the corner of his class, or was he a guy playing sports or pulling pranks on his friends, things like that?
Yeah, well, all the above. I mean, I was a big athlete. I always loved sports. I played 3 sports in high school, won a bunch of awards, which was great. But I mean, if you go back to middle school, I was always selling something. I had selling socks on eBay. I was selling, candy out of my locker. I was breaking into the science lab to tinker around different things. So all the above on that front. And then in high school, I had an internship for a little bit and ended up just building softwares to automate my internship. So I also loved computers, and, I mainly loved I never fell in love with like programming just for the sake of programming, but really just like the fact that I could just not have to work because I programmed my job or stuff like that. That's what really excited me, was like, down to my core, while I do work really hard, I'm also I like to find the most efficient way to do things. And so I have always loved software for that reason.
And that's the cool thing. That's what I hear whenever I do talk to people who are in the tech space, and the most fascinating part that they find about technology and programming, certainly because I have also, it's in my course, and, I've had my experience with programming, and I tried my hands on web development. So what you get to know is first of all, you also find a deeper understanding of building things, and it's building things out of thin air. You're not laying bricks. You're not making designs, or you're not an architect, but you're still building value. You're creating programs, or you're creating applications that could be made just with you and a laptop and internet connection probably. And the second thing that really helps people also identify what they are interested in through programming is the thing that you mentioned, right? So you're able to automate the tasks through programming, and that allows you to figure out, okay, this can be replaced with something for code, right? And then you can actually explore the creative part to it, where you can say, okay, this could be automated. How do I make this more purposeful for the people that do end up using it? So I think that's really cool. That's the cool part about technology. And when I was going through your profile, you have a very diverse set of professional experiences. Could you tell me about that? You've done sales and marketing. Right now, you mentioned that you did an internship in software early on, and now you're building Nostra, and we'll definitely come to Nostra in detail. But let's talk about the diverse work background that you have. Tell me all about it.
Sure. Yeah. So I worked at a company called Castlade Health, which was a healthcare transparency startup, probably one of the first healthcare technology companies ever in the world.
Wow.
And I had a great time there. I worked there for a bit of time, and then ended up working at Comcast NBC, actually evaluating early stage healthcare products, and helping the benefits team there, source and look at them. That was another interesting. It was kind of like, all right, I was on the sell side, now I'm on the buy side.
Yep.
And then took a 180 out of healthcare and into cybersecurity, where I, worked on the marketing team over at App Authority, which was sold to Symantec, which was, again, another interesting experience for me, and had a good time there. And then, moved over to Titan House, which was, just a classic B2B SaaS business, selling databases, and learned a lot, or, pretty much selling a database of people, and learned a lot about, constructing databases over there. And then, I was like, you know what? I don't really like working for other people. It's not really in my personality.
Yeah.
And so I just started the business. It was a travel company to begin with. The travel business, quite frankly, was not good during the pandemic. It really, really, really killed all of our customers.
Yeah.
And so I decided, hey, let's restart. Let's, start interviewing new customer profiles. Found some unbelievably great customers who helped, really shape the product and the vision of Nostra, and, kind of got into building the business I am in now.
Let me just go back to the point where you mentioned, that fact during this professional work experience that you were having, and you sense this realization of, wait, hold up. I don't like doing this stuff for the people. And, if I do end up putting this much amount of hours and all the time and, the effort that I'm giving in, why not just try something out for myself? Let's see how it goes. That decision, I sometimes think that it certainly comes to most people, right? So I don't think that it's a very different realization, but what I really think is unique is people following up on that realization. So I think people, so you've done jobs, right? And I'm still a college student, but you must relate to this, that doing jobs, you certainly feel a moment when you have to get up on Monday and you have to put in that shift. You think, well, why am I doing that? Could I just quit and start something of my own? But that realization, and then actually working on that realization and executing it, that's a whole different story. And you did that. So that's the most unique and the kind of difficult part that people don't tread on usually. They keep thinking about, oh, I'll do something of my own someday, and that someday never comes. So was there a trigger to all of this? Like, was there an event that happened, or were you just like, okay, had enough of this, let me just start, tomorrow I quit, I go all in?
Yeah, so this was a moment that happened. That's a really, really good question. And not many people know this about me, but I had some family issues pop up. And, at the time, I didn't realize that, they triggered me into going in and kind of starting to pursue my own dreams.
Okay.
And to, spare everyone's privacy, I won't go into too much detail. But at the end of the day, what I kind of realized was like, what's the point of sleepwalking? This is what I want to do. This is the type of life I want to live. And if I don't just jump in and do it, I'll never do it. And so I just kind of took drastic changes, and jumped in. And it's one of those things that I didn't realize it actually at the time. Now I can only realize it when you kind of look at the timelines. And you're like, wait a second, that is like, this happened, then 6 months later, I'm doing this. Okay. Like that's a clear, 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
And so, that, it was really, taking a step back, subconsciously, I think, and saying, what really makes me happy? And, you think back to what did I do when I was in middle school and I had free time? Like that's what made me happy, was like just starting businesses and thinking and being creative and, kind of building momentum and going. And so that's what made me happy. And so I did it. I just jumped in and did it.
Do you feel that that rekindling this entrepreneurship spirit for you, which you had like early on in middle school, and then you kind of revisited it during your professional work experiences and all that? So did you think that this was more like emotion driven, or like taking that jump again, coming back to that question, and that jump is, should that be emotion driven? Because sometimes people do end up falling into this trap of, what, this idea seems really cool, let me just go all in. And it might sound rude, but sometimes that's not the best decision that you should take for yourself. But how does one actually, because you've done that entrepreneurship journey and you still are doing it at, in some sense, because I kind of sense that you've had a very diverse set of work experience also, which allows you to get a like a wholesome perspective on this. Do you think that this decision of should I pursue my entrepreneurial spirit, or should I try to progress through my career eventually and then find out a point where I do go back to my entrepreneurial journey? So is that decision more emotion driven, or is it like something that is very calculated and pros and cons and SWOT analysis and all of that?
Yeah, well, I can't speak to how other people should approach it, but for me, it was purely it was an emotion driven thing. It was like, all right, what do I like to do?
Yeah.
You can take kind of I have a venture capitalist on my cap table who says this, like the male MBA, approach, which is to look at a market, be like, all right, here's a gap in the market, and here's how I'm going to address it.
Yeah.
That wasn't me. I was more along the lines like, hey, I'm going to start a company.
Yeah.
And I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what it is, but I need to start a company. Like
Right.
That's what makes me happy, which is just running businesses, starting companies, and having a drive to make the hard decisions and to really, get a team together and, get, motivate people and, solve problems that are out there. So that was kind of mine, which it's less of even a decision and more of just like, hey, this is how I like to live my life.
Right.
And, this is what I'm going to do. Whereas, sometimes I do think that people run into trouble where it's like, hey, I spent 20 years at X, Y, and Z. I think that this is a problem. I'm going to go start a business around it. And
Yep.
then when they've got to go fire their, chief marketing officer, or they're not able to raise money super quickly, or, there's a HR issue or whatever, they just are like, let me just pack it up and go home. That's not, that's, sometimes you just, you're going to run into trouble if you don't actually have the passion to build a business. Now, some people have just like worked in corporate America and then they developed a passion to start a business, I'm sure, and then they go in. But I think that the number one thing is you have to be conscious that like, hey, I want to go through the emotional roller coaster of starting a company.
Yeah, making that conscious decision is also really important. I think if you are aware of what you're expecting out of it, and if you actually don't bullshit yourself on, starting a company is just me walking around as a boss and giving people orders. If you don't have that image, I think still you're making an aware decision, well-informed decision, but sometimes just people, are delusional and things like that. But that's a good perspective and a good take on it. Let's talk about AI, man. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Nostra is certainly an AI driven company, and correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes I've been like reading this on Twitter and mostly everywhere that people use AI just to increase the fanciness in the name. And I want to know the real perspective on this. And I know that you won't be able to call out names or things like that, but why do people do that, and what exactly is the deal with mostly all startups or new tech firms using AI powered, or this is AI driven technology? What's up with that?
Well, I think we're actually trying to think about this as well, which is because so many people have said that they're AI driven, it helps inspire confidence from customers, from investors, whether there's technology there or not.
Okay.
They say they're AI driven because, when they go to raise money, an AI company is valued at a higher rate than just a outsourced, marketplace or something like
Yeah.
that, whatever it is. And so they say that they're an AI company, whether they have AI or not. We don't fall into that bucket. We're actually an AI business that you couldn't run our business without AI.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the distinction there. And then, we run into the issue now where there are a lot of businesses that have claimed to use AI in our space that didn't really use AI. Like they may have had, very basic things in AI.
Yeah.
And so when we talk to customers, they're like, oh, another AI marketing company.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to think about how do we position ourselves to be a business that, how do we phrase what we're doing, automatic conversions, stuff like that, where we don't say AI, we explain the value that AI provides, rather than saying AI, because it's a little played out, in my opinion, from a customer perspective. The other thing that I think about with AI is, what is the purpose behind this? And so there are a lot of AI companies that, I guess my core thesis behind AI and a business world is, what can you use AI for that humans just weren't meant to do?
Right.
And like they're just not good at. So you can use AI to improve and augment and improve human-driven tasks. And there will be plenty of big businesses built that are doing that. But I think that where you really, really start to get into an interesting business that has the potential to be gigantic is when you can use AI to do things, to automate tasks that humans weren't really meant to do. So for example, for Nostra, it's, hey, were humans really supposed to A/B test 12 million combinations of content? Does that really seem like a good use of humans' time to run stats on every single visitor? It's just not human. Like if you had a million statisticians, sure, maybe you'd be able to do it, but that's not realistic. So that, I find that a more interesting business than something that a human could do, like writing copy, but AI is just doing it slightly faster. I think it's fine. I think that, you look at a lot of the GPT-3 companies, they're gonna do well, but it's just not as, for me, it's not as interesting of a problem space.
I think that's true. And you know what? This is a funny thing that I read on Twitter a couple of days back. So I read that someone just tweeted that most AI-driven companies are their AI is not artificial intelligence; it's anonymous Indians who are putting in the shift in IT here in India, and that cracked me up. And could you just tell me about this whole content marketing space and like how Nostra is plugging in and positioning itself in here? Like what exactly is the vision with Nostra?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a Steve Jobs quote that I come back to, which is content is king. So we're talking about the guy who invented all of these different amazing gadgets and devices. But what he was saying at the end of the day, what is the most important thing for a business is the content that they produce. Because, at the end of the day, that's who they are. That's, who stands with Apple, X, Y, and Z stands with Apple. And so what we do at Nostra is we allow you to, as a marketer, create a lot of different variations of content. So you can create 5 different images for your website, 3 different calls to action, 4 different customer testimonials, 5 different headlines, etc. Then, based on who's visiting the website, in real time, what we'll do is we'll say, all right, based on who's visiting this website, we'll determine, all right, our AI will say we should show image 3, customer testimonial 4, headline 7, call to action 3. And then what we'll do is we'll build and display that website to the person, in 50 to 250 milliseconds. And that's that. So essentially you as a marketer can, test out different things that you don't know will work and what won't work. And, really create a lot of content and spend your time focused on, hey, maybe a customer will like this, let's build it, rather than spending your time on, oh, let me test. We can automate all the testing, show the right variation of content, the right combination of content to the right visitor at the right time.
Wow. That makes sense, and that's like super cool stuff. Do you believe that the experience that you had with and with your work experience previously before Nostra helped you in this? Because like I remember talking to someone like through this podcast only. It was episode 17, I guess. So we talked about marketing. He's like the founder of digital marketing, an institute of digital marketing here in India. It's an online institute, and he talked to me about consumer psychology, consumer behavior, how that is like centric to anywhere sales and marketing. So having all that experience and trying out your personal take on actually selling and being on the buying side, as you mentioned in your second work experience, did that help you take a good guess on consumer psychology, or did you have to go out and study it comprehensively and picking out books and going through podcasts and things in general to understand how does a consumer think?
Yeah, well, I think the core thesis that I actually have is I don't know how consumers think,
Okay.
and that we'll let AI decide.
Okay.
So when I did all my research, there's no one in the background. There aren't any anonymous Indians just deciding what's being shown to who based
Yeah.
on my playbook.
Yeah.
It's simply we let data decide what consumers think,
Wow.
which is where I think it's more powerful, because a lot of times people kind of get into this idea and this theory that they know what's best and that they can just kind of think their way out of a box. I'm more of a believer in the idea that, hey, I don't know the best way out of each box. Let's come up with the most scientifically rigorous and statistically proven way to get out of the box, and then let's press go and figure it out that way, rather than being reliant on a 26-year-old performance marketer who just has a feeling. Like, that's not really
Right.
a good idea, in my opinion. But when it comes to selling to organizations, yeah, my time selling, previously at, other companies, as well as my time buying was invaluable in understanding, all right, these are what buy signals look like. These are what sell signals look like, et cetera.
Do you think, I have to ask you this question because this classic debate of AI versus humans, and you very, I don't know, you very comprehensively pointed this out that is this something that a human should do, or is this something that could be automated with programs and AI? But do you think that this stuff that you just said, you put out a performance marketer out of job, a 26-year-old who maybe graduated from a good college, and he had aspirations of, I'll do this in marketing and that. So now he views Arthur Root as a sci-fi evil cop CEO. Is that something that you're trying to generate here, or what's your take on this whole classic AI versus humans eating out jobs debate?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, because, no, we didn't put the 26-year-old performance marketer out of a job. We just repurposed his job.
Right.
So before, he was spending his time running A/B tests and seeing, okay, is this performing better than that? And part of his time was doing that, and then part of his time was creating copy and images. I don't know anybody from my background that studied marketing and then wanted to go run a bunch of A/B tests. Right. People who I know who study marketing are super creative and, people and want to spend their time coming up with these customer journeys and this amazing content. And so what we're doing is we're enabling, those marketers and those entrepreneurs to create the future, to spend their time thinking about what could they possibly build and how could it possibly work, rather than spending their time kind of looking at me and twiddling, rather than, running, A/B tests and doing, kind of mindless tasks. And
Right.
so, yes, there will be some marketers who are displaced. But what we're actually really allowing marketers to do is to get back to the fundamentals of why they went into the business.
That's right. That sounds right. And I also believe that that AI, or whenever a displacement in jobs happens, like people often talk about cars putting horse riding, what do you call them, cart, the people who drove the carts, they put them out of business. Well, did they, or did they just repurpose their task to now driving automobiles? So I think that's like a more intelligent take on it. Do you think that and I read this tweet on one of your tweets, that being an entrepreneur is sometimes I'm doing an Excel sheet thing, sometimes I'm hiring a person, and sometimes I'm being the HR, sometimes I'm being this, sometimes I'm being that. Do you think you are like a good generalist in those terms, and you enjoy those tasks, or sometimes it does get overwhelming and you feel, if I could just go back to my old job?
No, I love it. What I like to find is people who are smarter than me at
Right.
any given thing, and trying to surround myself with them.
Right.
And so, yes, early on, it's like, all right, I got to file taxes, do X, Y, and Z, build technology, be on the product team, be on the sales team, be on the marketing team, et cetera. Be the marketing team, be the sales team if you're talking day one. But as you grow, it becomes cool because you end up getting to look at these people, and I just hired, someone, and it's like, wow, this person literally, like, I don't have, like, I can check in, ask questions, do my job as a CEO, but now I don't have to, actually go and run all these campaigns, or I don't have to go and write this code, or whatever it is. And so, I think that the sign of a good entrepreneur, or even just a good leader in general, is when they can surround themselves with people who are far more competent than they are at any given task. And so that they have the right person doing the task, not them doing the task. And that's a transition that not everyone's able to make. And so it's something that, as a leader, I'm always looking out for, with other leaders in my business, to say, hey, who's surrounding themselves with the smartest people? How are they doing that? How are they, helping to, mentor people? How are those people doing? What are they seeing about their leader, et cetera? That's the sign of a good leader, which is when they're like, hey, look, the people that they hired are so smart. They make this guy look amazing. But if they're not willing to surround themselves with the smartest people, they really don't really have a place at a business and in a leadership role.
And that is mostly because you won't be the best at everything, and you have to accept that. I think sometimes what happens is people try to cling on to a certain department that they were maybe good at when they were starting out, and it feels like an ego death to them. Like, do I have to give this up? I am the CEO. Are you sure that you're better than this at me? And I think that's like kind of a cynical game that you get into, and you end up hurting yourself only. Do you think about, do you think like now it's very cool? I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, but I see people all around, especially in India. I just feel that this is like a new age of startups and people raising financing and VC culture in general. Do you think most people, or like the intention that many people have, like starting out with a product or a service or whatever, now I see that there's an inclination towards raising of funding is more important than whatever they're trying to build. And sometimes people are just targeting to, we raise this much amount of funds and then we move to series A, series B, whatever. So is that the right approach? Is that something that people should be looking out for, or what's like a good way to approach this whole world of financing your startups in general?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of different things here. Number one is to determine if you're building a venture business or not. A lot of companies are not venture businesses, and quite frankly, that might be the preferred route for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, it's probably a better lifestyle. You have less pressure. You probably are building a venture business if there's a potential for the company to be worth over $1 billion. Okay. And it's a big market. And if you don't raise money, your competitor probably will. Because if you're in the world where you want to build a bootstrapped company, but all your competitors are raising tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, you're probably not going to win because they just have a huge war chest. So step number one is to determine if you are a venture business. And if you aren't, don't raise a bunch of venture money, because then you're going to have unrealistic expectations for the business, and it's just not going to be a good fit for anyone. If you are raising a venture, if you are building a venture business, there's a saying that just, there's no value created by fundraising. It's a necessary, it's something that's necessary. You have to scale your business, you have to attract investors, you have to hit milestones, and you have to build quickly. But, there's no value that when you get that term sheet at a $1 billion valuation, you're not creating value for the business. When you're creating, so it's kind of a fine line to walk, which is you do need to inspire confidence, and having an extra $10 million when you're a seed stage business is very valuable. Like that is that is a war chest. That is something that is extremely valuable. But you also have to be conscious that, if you raise too much money too early on, then you kind of end up in the situation where your valuation is so high. So, let's say you raise at a $500 million valuation for your first fundraise.
Yeah.
When people are investing at $1 billion valuation or a $5 billion valuation, you better have 100 million or 200, $300 million in revenue. And quite frankly, you usually have 18 to 24 months to get there. So if you raise your first round at a $500 million valuation and you raise $50 million, somehow you got to figure out how to get to $50 million in revenue within 24 months in order to continue to withstand that valuation, especially if the market turns. So you end up in these awkward positions when you raise too much money too early at too high of a valuation that end up, it hurts the entrepreneur a little bit. Doesn't hurt the investors that much, but it really hurts the employees at the business. So you have to, manage expectations, because their options are tied to that valuation and, along those lines.
Do you think like you've had this experience of being in this space, and do you think that why is this, like I'm intrigued by this idea, like what do you feel is the intent behind raising money too quickly? Like people, once they identify that maybe they could be a venture business, let's say. So one thing could be like, okay, my competitors could be raising money faster and they could, scale at a faster rate. But like, what do you feel is one thing that most people do end up missing out on? Like raising funds, they're in a hurry. So are there some markers that people can identify? Okay, if I'm thinking in this direction, it could probably not be the right path on raising funds.
Yeah. So when you're a pre-seed, really it's just a good founder with a decent idea. That's what you're looking at.
Right.
When you're getting to your seed, and I'm not sure what the comps are in India, but when you're getting to a seed, it's like, all right, you've got a couple customers that kind of like it. Maybe they're paying, maybe they're not, but there's something there. And clearly people think it's an interesting concept.
Okay.
And then when you get to the Series A, it's like we have product market fit. So people are willing to pay us for our software. They stick with it and they think that it's a very valuable piece of software for the business. In the old days, it used to be that you'd be at $1 million in annual recurring revenue if you were a SaaS business. I'm not sure, that number, in this fundraising climate, that number has been far lower. I think when the climate turns, it'll be a little bit higher. Right. But generally the rule of thumb is like, you have product market fit, people are going to pay for it, and it's starting to look like a real business. Yeah. And then when you get, to the growth stages, it's, people are valuing you based on your revenue, and you get good multiples, and it's how fast are you growing.
I think I personally got this introduction to financing and this whole investing in businesses world through Shark Tank. And I used to watch Shark Tank as a kid, and now they've made this Shark Tank version in India as well. So this season it premiered, and people were just going crazy. And this was the first time that they made something like this, and people really liked it. And it kind of fascinates me that now once you put topics like these into forms of entertainment, then it kind of strikes a balance in entertaining people and also educating them. Like people are now talking about equity and, how much, what is, let's say, a good amount of revenue before you look for financing and things like that. So what was your introduction to this world? Like, did you also start with Shark Tank, or were you into books and all of that?
No, I grew up in Silicon Valley, so I was always kind
Oh,
of aware about,
that's great.
fundraising. And, quite frankly, when you watch Shark Tank, I've seen a couple episodes. I have a friend who's been on it. They give like just awful terms. Like they're just like predatory. The sharks. I mean, I guess that's the way. So I think good entrepreneurs
Yeah,
who, they're like, why would I? Like, it's like, if you don't have to go and give up 20% of your business for $100,000, like, why would you go do that? When you could go to a venture capitalist and give up 20% of your business for $3 million.
right.
You're like, why would I, like, how helpful is Mark Cuban really going to be? Like, not
That's
really that
true.
helpful.
Yeah.
So they have awful terms. I don't know what Shark Tank India is like, but something tells me that they probably are equally as aggressive. With that said, a lot of the businesses aren't venture businesses, so they
Right.
don't demand venture valuations.
Yeah.
And so there's some businesses, they need, a $250,000 cash injection to get started, and then they're profitable. They're not going to be $1 billion company in 3 years, but they're going to be profitable and they're going to generate returns for their investors. And, in order for those returns to be substantial, the investor needs to own a significant portion of the business. So, if you're not building a venture-backed business, I get it. If you are building a venture-backed business, it just makes no sense.
Don't go to Shark Tank. That's Arthur's advice to you.
Well, yeah, and that's easier for me to say, kind of having the Silicon Valley in me. So, at the end of the day, there's a saying, which is allocation is measured in percentage and success is measured in multiples. And so if you give up 20% of your business, but you build a big business, you're going to be able to sleep pretty well at night.
Yeah.
But if you own 100% of nothing, who cares?
That's right. Let me just wrap this conversation up. And it was so this is what I like about podcasts in general, man. And we were talking about before recording this, that you also ended up starting a podcast to get to know more about the whole marketing space, and that's how you led to Nostra. And so, like, during this conversation also, I got to know so much about things, and which would have maybe took me a lot of time reading and researching on the internet. And sometimes through these conversations, you just can ask questions that you can't find on the internet as clearly, and you can't find answers to them as personalized as you could maybe in a real human to human conversation. So that's like my whole appreciation of the podcasting space in general. Let me know your views on this whole Web3 world that is popping up. Do you because you have a background in Silicon Valley, and you certainly are in the tech industry, I want to know, is this what is this? Is this a bubble? Is this something that's huge? Is this the future? Is metaverse? What is it? Like, I don't know anything about it. I know NFTs, I know cryptocurrencies and all of that, but are we really going into that direction? That's what I want to know.
That's a question that everybody wants to know the answer to. And I don't, quite frankly, I'm not the right guy to know about that topic.
Yeah.
My understanding is it's hot. People like it. There was just a recent correction, it seems like, but there's a lot of money flowing into this industry. People are saying that it reminds them of the internet.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember, the internet had a bubble.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what would have happened if you had invested in, the NASDAQ at the top of the bubble. Probably would still do all right because you would have owned Apple, Amazon, Netflix, etc. Now, you also would have lost 80% of your companies. And that's kind of the venture model, which is like, most of these companies will not succeed, period. Mm-hmm. That's what you're expecting as a venture capitalist. Yeah. With that said, a couple of these companies will be huge, and those will create outsized returns for investors. And if you're an employee at one of those companies and it becomes huge, or you're a founder, you will do incredibly well. Yeah. So that's kind of what I see as kind of where things are. I'm always when I think about crypto and Web3 versus kind of the, two of the hottest markets, in my opinion, are, AI and Web3.
Yeah.
And I kind of decided to spend my time in the AI world because it's a sure bet that AI, like, I don't think there's a single person in the world that will ever argue that AI is going anywhere. Like, it just isn't. Like, people just know
that's true.
AI is going to be part of everything.
Yeah.
There's still this question mark on Web3. It seems to be that it is, but it's also not 100% clear.
Right.
So that's kind of where we are, in my opinion, when it comes to Web3 and crypto. So I think it, from my understanding, it is, but it's also just not my field of expertise. I've got a lot of really, really smart friends who, say, "Hey, this is it, Arthur. You got to get in on it." But I can't go into the details, if you will, because it's not what I know.
And that's the point where Arthur tries to diplomatically slip out of the conversation, right? Yeah, guys, that's great. I will do some research on it and I'll get back to you. I think that's what you do. It's been awesome, man. It's been talking to you has been awesome. I think that what I should do is, like, since you are in this AI space, and I would love to, whatever is the fate of this podcast, just reconnecting with you in the next 3 years, or where are things now, and what's up with the AI and Web3 space. Then let's figure this bubble out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me know how I can be helpful. I'm always around to help and do whatever I can, and love to stay in contact and go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much, Arthur, for taking the time out to do this, man. It was really, really amazing talking to you.
All right, that sounds good. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of this really awesome episode of the Most Serious Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it did add some value in your life. We will be back again with another interesting conversation pretty soon.